the pandemic is here. Endemic na, sabi ni Secretary Dominguez, kasi it is here to stay. In face of the reality of death and the number na namamatay, ayaw pa ninyo mapagbakuna, ay wala na akong ginawa na namin ang lahat. Sabi nga, pag nabili yung lahat ng bakuna, sobra. Kasi maraming tumatanggi. Ay nako, ulitin ko ulit. Pag hindi ka nagbakuna, mamatay ka talaga. So planuhin mo na yung buhay mo kung paano pagdating ng panahon. Pili ka ng kabaong o kasunog ka. Magkanong bayaran mo at maghanap ka na ng pwesto sa semeteryo. Ganyan yan eh. Yung hindi magpabakuna o takot magpabakuna, babay na lang. At sa inyo.
The news day continues here on One News Now. I'm Charles Lejano. President Rodrigo Duterte appeals to human rights groups to take a deeper look into the drug situation in the country. This as Duterte claims many people have died in the drug war because they resisted arrest and fought back against authorities. To discuss this and other issues raised at last night's address, we have Maricel Halili. She is reporting live from Mandaluyong. Good morning, Maricel. Let's start with the government's updates on the drug war. How are they planning to deal with this possible ICC probe? Is this really happening?
Good morning, Charles. Actually, Palas has yet to answer the possible ICC probe on the drug war of the Philippine government. As we all know, ICC prosecutor Fatu Bensouda is already planning to request for a judicial authority to conduct investigation in the Philippines. We're still waiting for the statement coming from Malacanang. Because this is a new development. So later, during the press briefing of presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, maybe he can answer that.
All right, let's talk about the issue of the pandemic for now, Mased. Did the government give any further explanation as regards the quarantine classifications that are set to be implemented beginning tomorrow?
Actually, Charles, the ordinary general community quarantine is almost similar with the GCQ with restrictions and with heightened restrictions to be implemented in NCR plus areas. The only difference, according to presidential spokesperson Harry Roque, is that in areas under GCQ with heightened restrictions, including Cavite, Laguna, and Rizal, their dining or dine-in restaurants will only be limited up to 30%. Unlike in ordinary GCQ, it can be up to 50%. While in NCR and Bulacan, both places are placed under GCQ with restrictions. They can only accommodate, of course, up to 30% of the dine-in in a restaurant. And there's a difference when it comes to the reopening of the gyms and indoor sports venue. This time in NCR and Bulacan, the gyms and indoor sports venue will be allowed to open up to 30% venue capacity even without the safety seal certification. But with safety seal certification, there can be additional 10% when it comes to accommodating their customers.
All right, let's talk about vaccine procurement. We have Finance Secretary Sonny Dominguez saying that 85 billion pesos is enough for vaccine procurement. Where do we get the funds for this, and how many Filipinos are expected to benefit from this budget?
Okay, Finance Secretary Dominguez said that Of course, our funding will come from the General Appropriations Act, from the budget of the Department of Health. We also have funding from the Bayanihan 2. And the national government has already borrowed budget from some international financing agencies, including the World Bank and the Asian Development Bank. We're expecting about 70 million Filipinos to benefit from this, because this funding will be used for our vaccination program.
Yeah, Jose, could you just give us an update on how many Filipinos exactly have received the vaccine so far, and how far off we are insofar as the government's targets are for today?
So far, according to Vaccine Star Carlito Galvez, more or less 7 million Filipinos have already been vaccinated, but that's just around 6.5% something of the total population. So we're still far from achieving the population protection. But they are still optimistic, considering that we're expecting about 11 million doses of vaccines to be delivered in the country by July.
Right. Let's say one last question. There was this announcement that the overall case trend in the country was plateauing. How did the health department react to this? What were their recommendations after this announcement?
Actually, this is a welcome development, considering that, well, like you said, that we can see that the trend is now plateauing. But Health Secretary Francisco Duque still reminds the public, particularly in the NCR Plus, to still adhere to the minimum health protocols. But for those living in Visayas and Mindanao, obviously there's a surge in cases there. Secretary Duque advised the local government unit to make sure that there will be additional medical equipment like ventilators in the hospital, and to provide more spaces, bed capacity in the hospitals to accommodate possible patients of COVID.
Thanks for those updates, Mased. That was Maricel Halili reporting live from Mandaluyong. Contrary to claims by the president and other government officials, the traffic has eased along EDSA. Scenes of long lines from last week's rush hour commute revealed that despite the pandemic, EDSA's problems are far from over. Gerard de la Peña with the rest of the story.
Ang traffic ngayon sa EDSA maluwang na.
Just last week, the president exclaimed heavy traffic in EDSA had eased. But photos of scenarios in EDSA last Friday showed otherwise, with hundreds of passengers stopped and lining up at the Ortigas station of EDSA busway in Mandaluyong. Social distancing was hardly observed. Apart from the heavy rains, the LTFRB attributed this to the traffic jam in Makati, which prevented buses from entering the exclusive lane. They now want the dispatch of buses to be expedited to fill the demand.
Nag-a-average sila ng mga 320 to 350 daily. According to the consortium kasi, minsan may mga drivers na kukulang din sila ng drivers. We have to address it at para ma-increase natin yun.
On Monday morning, commuters like Clarissa and Ellie had to line up for more than 30 minutes at the EDSA busway just to catch a free trip. Ride here is free for health workers and authorized persons outside of residence.
Sobrang init, sobrang haba. Pero yung haba ng aking oras na pagpunta, syempre, hassle.
Motorists are also starting to have a difficult time on EDSA. Based on NMDA data, vehicular volume on the major thoroughfare now average 380,000 cars per day. This is already way above the 260,000 daily volume that EDSA was designed for. It's also not too far from the pre-pandemic average of 405,000 cars. Despite this, the MMDA is not yet considering bringing back the number coding scheme.
Pero sa ngayon, sa nakikita namin mga numero, although ang ating volume ay halos pareho na nung pre-pandemic, ay hindi naman kinakailangan dahil maganda naman ang dalo ng trapiko.
The MMDA also believes that the opening of several bridges and skyways will help ease traffic in the metro. For News 5, Gerard de la Peña, we are One News.
The IACT continues its crackdown on colorum vehicles in the metro ahead of the government's easing of more quarantine protocols in the NCR Plus bubble. Justine Ponsalang reports live from Rojas Boulevard in Parañaque City to give us more details. Justine, good morning. Could you tell us how anti-colorum operations went this morning?
Charles, 3 colorum vehicles were apprehended by the Interagency Council for Traffic, or IACT, here in Parañaque this morning. The drivers reasoned out that while they are aware of the possible repercussions of driving colorum vehicles, they said that they had no choice because the pandemic forced them out of their jobs. Both of the apprehended vehicles were flying Cavite to Manila routes and vice versa. They were found to be charging their passengers a minimum of 100 pesos each per ride. The drivers admitted that they were aware that driving colorum passenger vehicles is illegal, but they said they decided to take their chances. One used to be a driver for hire pre-pandemic, but with travel and vacation restrictions, he no longer has a stable source of income. He added that the operator of the van also decided to shift from being a van for hire to a colorum passenger transportation just to have a daily income. The other driver, meanwhile, said that he was currently processing his van to be a service delivery vehicle. While waiting for the approval, he tried to get additional income by ferrying passengers. IACT operations team leader, retired Colonel Jose Manuel Bonibi, said that whatever reasons the drivers have, they still will impound the vehicles in Pampanga on top of their 200,000 peso fine. He explained that they had to apprehend colorum vehicles because of the dangers they pose to their passengers. Bonibi explained that colorum vehicles do not guarantee their passengers insurance should there be an accident. Charles, aside from the anti-colorum operations, the operatives of IACT also inspected public utility vehicles to make sure that they follow the so-called 7 commandments of this pandemic. These includes the wearing of face masks and face shields, no using of cell phones, and no eating inside the vehicles, proper vehicle ventilation, proper and frequent disinfection, use of passenger barriers, and the no symptomatic passenger on board policy. Charles?
Thanks for that, Justine. That was Justine Punsalang reporting live from Parañaque. And those are the top stories at this hour. Join us again later at 12 noon as we continue to monitor the day's biggest stories. You can also catch One News on Signal Play. Register for a free account now at www.signalplay.com and stream One News live anytime, anywhere. I'm Charles Lejano. Mask on, wash hands, and stay safe, Philippines. We are One News.